I thought, well, what if I could turn some of my adventures into curriculum-based content? What if, rowing across an ocean, they could learn a bit of maths or science? And then people would say to me, but that's got nothing to do with maths or science. And I would say, well, how do you think I would calculate how the distance and the speed and the time it's going to take me, or how many calories that I've got to fuel my body with? And the science, the ocean is a big scientist playground. It's full of science. It's it's another world in itself. And then we would look at the science of things like psychology or biology, how the human body works, because they've all got to be at optimum performance to be able to do an adventure.
My guest this week is Jordan Wylie. Jordan is an extreme adventurer, best-selling author. You may even recognise him as a hunter on Channel 4's award-winning shows Hunted and Celebrity Hunted, and currently is a national ambassador for the Army Cadets. Jordan served 10 years in the British Army before moving into maritime security, and most recently, he is the founder of Expedition STEM. Jordan, welcome to STEM with Mr. N.
Thank you very much, Stuart, aka Mr. N. What a privilege to be here.
It's a privilege to have you join me. So can we just start off with, what is Expedition STEM and what do you do as its founder?
Expedition STEM, what is it? Well, I think the best way to describe it would be to, I guess, touch on a little bit on my early journey, because I was not the best student, dare I say, and it shames me to say that to a teacher, because I was probably a bit of a teacher's nightmare in my teenage years. I was, I'm not proud of it at all, but I was quite disruptive. I was often wishing that I could be anywhere else, except, inside that classroom. I didn't want to be there. I'd look out the window. I wanted to play football. I wanted to climb the trees, camp out, go fishing, whatever it was, but except for be inside that classroom from 9 till 3, which when I look back, and I'm quite ashamed of that, because one thing that I have done for the last 20 years, both as a soldier and as an adventurer, is I've been able to travel the world and see some of the great places around the globe, but also some of the real hardships in life that children experience, especially in conflict zones. And what I've come to learn over my lifetime is that having access to education is one of the greatest privileges in its own right. And that's one of the reasons why I've gone back to education, I think, as an adult. But for me, I always found I learned a lot more from being in the outdoors. I found that, whether it was climbing a mountain or swimming down the river or whatever it might be, I found there was lots of aspects of those little mini adventures, as I would call them, to be able to learn and grow and develop and build resilience and all those good things. Over the last sort of 5-6 years, where I've been working full-time as an adventurer, I found that I was going into schools and I was doing talks, whether they be sort of motivational or inspirational. And the teachers would often say to me, they would say, Jordan, that's brilliant, and very kindly say, you've inspired all our students, but so what? It's like, you've done that, but now what? You've inspired us all, but now you're going to go away and we're never going to see you again. And you know what? That probably happens with a lot of other guest speakers and adventurers as well. People go into a school, they do a great job. And I sort of call it, when you go in as a guest speaker, I try and be what I would call a hook to learning. I want to hook the children in with a bit of an interesting story about an adventure. And then what I like to do in the perfect world is pass them over to the teachers, because we've got their attention, they're engaged, and now the teachers can do what they're really great at, is in delivering that curriculum-based content. So what I thought was that instead of me just leaving the teachers with a real hard task of now, it's maintaining that sort of enthusiasm that you might have developed in an assembly or a class, I thought, well, what if I could turn some of my adventures into curriculum-based content? What if, rowing across an ocean, they could learn a bit of maths or science? And then people would say to me, but that's got nothing to do with maths or science. And I would say, well, how do you think I would calculate how the distance and the speed and the time it's going to take me, or how many calories that I've got to fuel my body with? And the science, the ocean is a big scientist playground. It's full of science. It's another world in itself. And then we would look at the science of things like psychology or biology, how the human body works, because they've all got to be at optimum performance to be able to do an adventure, ideally. So, and then the same with engineering. Engineering, whether it's flying in a helicopter or again in an ocean rowing boat, or these things have to float. There's drag, there's weight, there's whatever, volume, density, all these weird and wonderful things that you would normally only ever see in a school. They're actually embedded in all aspects of an adventure. But because it's an adventure, people see that, but you're just having fun. That's not a job. That's not a career. And for me, I'm trying to, and I certainly haven't mastered it yet, but I'm trying to turn my adventurers and lots of other people's adventures into curriculum-based content that teachers can use in the classroom to help engage and hook those children into learning. That's what Expedition STEM's all about, and I appreciate that's the longest-winded version of Expedition STEM you've ever heard. But it's about inspiring young people into STEM through adventure, ultimately, and it's completely free. I'm a volunteer. It's a community interest company. We rely on sponsorship to develop content, and I work with lots of different teachers to help me turn my content into adventure curriculum content, and not only curriculum aligned, but also aligned to the sustainable development goals. So we're trying to do a bit of good in the world as well, as inspire students, hopefully.
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpick from that, and a lot of things you've touched on that I do want to go into and talk about in this interview. And I really like the fact that you were pointing out there that, and I'm going to put it in different terms from you, but as I always say to my class, everything is science and STEM. Everything around us is there as a result of that, and I think it's great the way you're linking that in to your adventures. But you'd said that you were the pupil that would have caused me and other teachers nightmares, not paying attention and things like that. And then in Running for My Life and The Power of Paddle, where you've been doing these adventures to raise money for children, has that come from your new appreciation now of what you had when you were younger? Absolutely.
I think, one thing I believe in life, again, it's only through experience really that I've learned this, is that sometimes it's very easy to be a victim. And, I used to think I was a bit of a victim when I was growing up as a teenager. I would often revert back to, well, I've got no qualifications. I grew up on a council estate or whatever it might be. I'd always find an excuse for it. But then as a soldier at 16 and joining the army and traveling the world and going to conflict zones, war zones, I got to see that my life was absolutely brilliant compared to most kids out there. When I've been in conflict zones and war zones, one of the things that kids always want to do is go to school and learn. And many of the kids will never have that. And that made me realize that I was actually very lucky. I wasn't a victim in any way. I was one of the most privileged children on the planet, if we narrow it down. And I think that when you experience that firsthand, you can't help but be compelled to try and go back to these places and try and do something or try and help others. Because again, I've been very lucky in life to have some great role models and people who have given me a leg up and people who have reached out and help me get a foot on the ladder or whatever I was trying to do. So I think you always have to pay it forward. I think that life is very reciprocal. I think you have to try and help the next generation. We have a duty, a responsibility to do that, not just as teachers or educators, but as humans, humanity, So I spend a lot of time with children and it's absolutely my greatest passion. But as well as leaving school with no qualifications, I am very proud to say, although I was embarrassed, I left. I'm very proud that I've done my GCSEs, my A-levels, my bachelor's degree, my master's degree. I've done the full cycle and gone back through education. But what I would often say to young people is, when you do it as an adult, it's one, you have to pay for that privilege, so you don't get it for free when you're an adult. You have to pay to go to college and school, which is absolutely crazy. If you're a teenager listening to that, you don't want to be spending your hard-earned pocket money or paper round money or whatever it is people do these days. You don't want to be spending that and going back to school, because that's what I had to do. And also that to understand that you can learn in so many different ways. But one thing that I found differentiates most people from the rest of the world, even above qualifications, above experience, is your attitude. I think your attitude towards learning, is absolutely everything, you know. And when I say learning, I don't necessarily mean in a school or in a classroom. I mean in life in general, you know, in everyday activities. But yeah, it definitely traveling the world changed my whole perspective to do a complete U-turn. You know, I love education. Teachers are my heroes these days, and they were my worst nightmare for the first 16 years of my life.
Well, the attitude bit is actually a great lead into something else that I wanted to speak about. And although this isn't STEM related, I think with the breadth of what you've done, you have so much that you can share to inspire and help other people. So on the attitude point, like many young boys in Britain, and hopefully now more young girls with the success of the Lionesses, but football was obviously a big thing to you, and you had the potential platform to go on into football. So on that attitude point, what was it that kind of led that astray and football didn't go ahead, that is a potential pitfall for other young people that might be wanting to go down that route?
No, that's a great question, and I think, you know, like certainly when I was growing up and you was growing up, a lot of young boys and hopefully girls, as you say now, they want to be footballers. You know, they see what a great job though, to get paid to go and play football for a living. It must be one of the greatest privileges in the world, and I think it doesn't matter what your dream is. You know, for me it was always football, but what I lacked was something that I learned in the military, was discipline. You know, I think discipline is the bridge really between having a goal and achieving a goal, because it's very easy to want something and to dream about something and wish that you could have something. But if you haven't got the discipline, the self-belief, the motivation to go out and work towards that goal, well, then exactly what happened to me will be the situation. You know, you will fall off the wayside. For me, at the age of 14, 15, 16, I discovered what a lot of teenagers discover. I was very close to alcohol. I was exposed to drugs, again, not through my family, but just through, I guess, the area I grew up in, the people I choose to associate with. You discover girls, you know, as a boy, you start taking an interest in women. And these are all things that naturally happen through things like puberty. You know, this is normal. It's not a taboo subject or anything, but these happen. And what I would call those things, looking back, are big distractions, big sort of temptations, distractions that can then lead you off track and lead you astray. And I think, again, as I've sort of matured and as I've grown up in life, you come to realize that if you've got a dream, you have to be absolutely relentless in pursuit of that dream. You know, you've got to be quite selfish, in fact, but you've got to look after yourself and make sure, you know, I look at people these days like Gary Neville, who's a Sky Sports pundit, an ex-Man United player. He was never the greatest footballer. He was never a brilliant footballer, but he was absolutely disciplined. He was relentless in pursuit of wanting to be a footballer. He ate the right food. He was in bed on a Friday night at 7 o'clock when his friends were down the park drinking, and he lived and breathed that goal all his life. And he's an absolute product of his commitment now to doing that. And I think it's a great example to young people who you know, another thing to consider is you have to be realistic, I think, in your goals. You know, if you're not a great footballer or even a very good footballer, you're probably not going to be a footballer. And so, but the same, whether you want to, you know, I hear a lot of children these days, they want to be YouTubers. You know, one of my big horrors is when I hear people who tell me they want to be famous or they want to be an influencer. It's something I hear a lot in schools these days. And, you know, I don't know what's happening and what's changing in the world, but you know, there's some real challenges out there, I think, in what children want to be. I think, if I'm honest, I'm quite passionate about this subject, and maybe we digress a bit here, but I think we need more role models in society. I think we need more people like, you know, when I was a kid, people, if they didn't want to be a footballer and they wanted what I would call a more professional and a more serious career, they would want to be teachers, they'd want to be doctors, the nurses, soldiers, firefighters. Kids don't want to be these things anymore. When I ask them, they want to be influencers, Instagram models, celebrities, YouTubers, vloggers, bloggers. And, you know, I try to teach kids myself that, okay, you want to be a YouTuber. What does that mean? Well, let's break that into a career. Let's think about filmmaking. Let's think about sound engineers, technicians, lighting. Let's think about the movies or TV. But just sitting in your phone, looking into a screen in your bedroom, for me, is not a career choice that we should be encouraging, but it's what a lot of people want to do these days. And it breaks my heart, to be honest.
Well, that's one of the important points that you brought up there, is about having role models. And that's obviously one of the aims of what I'm doing with these interviews. And that's why it's a great privilege to have somebody like yourself come on. And after the footballing didn't work out for you, you did go on to one of these other careers that you've just mentioned there by joining the army. And although you didn't have the discipline for the football, the army gave you that discipline. But I know from reading Citadel, which unfortunately I've left on my desk and that's why it's not behind me, but it is a brilliant book, so definitely go and check that out. But even though you had the discipline in the army, it was then a back injury that kind of sidelined what was going on in the army and kind of took that sort of dream away from you. How do you keep picking yourself back up after dreams kind of, you start heading in that route and they fall apart?
Yeah, it's I think it's the same as anyone in life. I think it's, you know, everybody's got a story. Everybody has setbacks, you know, and I think that's really important for young people to understand as well, that life isn't easy. You know, the moment, in fact, while you're at school, although it seems really tough and really challenging, it's probably one of the easiest parts of your life. And maybe that's not great, because life's going to get harder for a lot of people, because, you know, you have to go to work, you know, you will have families that you have to support, and all these sorts of weird and wonderful things that probably seem a million miles away right now, but trust me, that they're knocking on your door before you know it. And I think you just learn and you grow and you evolve as you get older. And there will always be setbacks, even as a teenager, you know, whether, as I say, going through puberty, it might be a relationship breakup. You might not do as well as you wanted to in your exams, your GCSEs, A-levels, whatever it might be. And what's important, I think I've come to learn, is that you don't dwell on the past, because you can't do anything about what's gone wrong, but you can take the lessons and apply it to your future. You know, if you've made mistakes and you've had failures, and we all have, I've had super big failures. I've made lots of mistakes in my life. And I've also done things that I'm not proud of. I've hurt people. You know, I've been in relationships where I haven't, not that I've cheated or been disloyal, but I've not, you know, I've been selfish with my time. I haven't provided time to my family or whatever it might be. And I've hurt people's feelings, and that's not something I'm proud of, but it's something that I certainly learn from and I apply to my future relationships. And I've had my own challenges with mental health as a result. And all you can keep doing is keep learning, you know, and that's, again, links to education, because you've got to keep learning. You've got to be prepared to keep dusting yourself off and keep moving forward. And there will be times when you feel like you can't move forward. There'll be times when you feel like you're in a deep, dark hole. And that's why it's also important to surround yourself with positive people as well, you know, positive influences. And also, likewise, you'll have friends who are going through that, and family members. And it's important that you be there for them as well, and reach out to them and talk to people, because only by talking to people can you get over these challenges and these obstacles. But I always think for young people as well, it's very easy to see the obstacle, when as an adult, I always try to see the opportunity. So if I fail or get something wrong, it's very easy to go, oh, we failed, it's the end. But actually I'm like, okay, we got that wrong, but how can we grow and evolve and develop as a result of what we've got wrong? And, you know, doing the paddling expedition, some people would say I failed to get round the whole of the UK because I was cut short during my paddle after 5 months at sea. But for me, I didn't see it as a failure at all. We raised a phenomenal amount of money and we built a school in Africa, inspired so many children. So for me, that's a success. But to some people, they might say you didn't get all the way around. But I really believe in harnessing a growth mindset, looking at the stepping stone as opposed to stumbling blocks and that sort of mentality.
Well, with the paddleboarding, you were certainly successful at social distancing, because I believe it was at the time of COVID-19. And because you touched on it a bit there, I know in the Power of Paddle, it was more than just the paddleboard around Great Britain, and that adventure linked into education. So can you share a bit about what is in the Power of Paddle and what the ultimate goal of that was and where the goal came from?
Yeah, I was trying to build a school on the Horn of Africa for about 4 years, I guess. And I've been doing different adventures, fundraising to try and build this school. And I was essentially trying to keep a promise to a little boy called Ibrahim, who I'd met 4 years earlier. And Ibrahim was a sort of I guess, a refugee who'd been displaced by the conflict in Somalia. And his dream was to go to school one day. And when he told me that dream initially, I just thought, you know, all the things in all the world, and all you want to do is go to school, something so simple, that something most of us in the West take for granted. And I don't know what came over me on that particular moment, but I made a promise, looked him in the eye and said, I'm going to build this school. And I definitely bit off more than I could chew, because it's been the biggest roller coaster ever trying to build a school when I'm not an engineer, I'm not a project manager, I'm just somebody who made a promise and loves adventure. But I'm delighted to say we built the school, but it took me on this incredible journey of different adventures and different fundraising events. And the power of the paddle is essentially about trying to paddleboard around Great Britain and raise enough money to finish building this school, which I'm delighted to say we built the school, but we didn't finish getting around Britain because of a global pandemic. But as I say, it doesn't matter to me. It didn't matter to me. And for me, we kept the promise, and that's all that matters.
Agreed. You know, getting that school built is more important than whether you get all the way around Great Britain on the paddleboard. But what an incredible thing to try and do, you know, with the paddleboarding around Great Britain, all on that strength of a promise. And it goes to show just what the power of a promise is like. So with all you've done with your platform to help education, why do you specifically like the STEM aspect of education?
I love the STEM aspect of education. I love the fact that it can be combined with adventure to spread these important messages. Because for me, I really struggle. Even today, when my daughter, who's 12, brings her homework home, she's in year 7 going into year 8 at high school in England, and I look at her maths and I can't even do it. And I'm embarrassed that I cannot do her maths homework, and she's 12, 13 years old. But then when she breaks it down into context, and for me as a learner, as an adult, context is everything. I have to be able to apply whatever I'm being taught into my life to be able to understand it. And I think that's the way I've always been. But when I was at school, that was never offered to me. It was always a textbook or you know, the blackboard or whiteboard or whatever it is that we'd use in those days. And now I just start to understand it. And when I'm talking to kids or cadets, I see them having the same challenges as me. I love, my favorite students and pupils to work for are the ones that are the teacher's worst nightmare, the ones that are disruptive, the ones that think they know better, the ones that are cocky, they're arrogant, they're cheeky. They're my favorites because I see them as a real challenge, and I really know that I can tap into, because a lot of these kids as well, they will have so much potential, but it's just not getting unlocked, and it's just not being released into the world because they've not been engaged in a way that helps them. And that's all I'm trying to do. And I've not got any secret recipe, but I know that every adventure I do, just like you said earlier, every aspect of life is full of STEM, and adventure is no different. You know, I think people talk about the technology side of my paddle, but people said to me when I finished, but you didn't use any technology. And I would say to them, how do you think I was being tracked? How do you think that I was liaising with the RNLI, the rescue stations, if I needed support or advice? How did I speak to my family every day? How did I upload to social media? That is technology in its purest form. That is tech. So as you say, it's everywhere, and we can use STEM as a great tool combined with other aspects of career or life to help educate children, I think.
And normally, I'm bringing this towards the end, and normally what I tend to do is finish with, have you any advice for children and young people out there who may be interested in STEM? And you've given lots of great advice already in this. So as a final thought, have you got any sort of final advice for kids who are interested in STEM, or just education or life in general advice? And also, can you tell us where people can access Expedition STEM?
Yeah, Expedition STEM is, you can find more information on the website, expeditionstem.co.uk. And in terms of advice, what would I say to a young person? Well, I think with regards to STEM specifically, I think just embrace it. You know, I think that's the most important thing. Immerse yourself in it, because it is all around you. And I always challenge people to look at how STEM is already embedded in their lives. You know, when you're at home, whether you're watching the TV, or whether you're going out for a walk, or whether you're down the park, STEM is all around you. And it's important to start to recognize that, because when you understand that it's all around you, I feel that that will bridge that gap between your normal life and the classroom, because you can use it as context then. But I think in terms of general advice, I have a little ABC rule that I often share with young people. We talked about attitude earlier. I think attitude is everything. I think attitude will take you to places that education and experience won't. I think having the right attitude, people will always give you a chance in life if you show willing. Build relationships everywhere you go. That's my B, because relationships often lead to opportunities. But don't build relationships because you want to get something. Be generous with your time. Help people where you can. Life's very reciprocal. You know, don't give to receive. Just help people, and life will take care of you, I promise. And C is learning. It's continued professional development. You know, I'm nearly 40 years old, and I've never stopped learning. And in fact, I learn more today than I ever learned, you know, as a youngster. And that's because my approach and my attitude to learning has changed. I'm always willing to listen, to grow and develop and evolve. And I think always remember that if you're talking, which I've been doing a lot of, you're regurgitating things that you already know. You know, you're not taking in new information, you're not learning. Somebody once said that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use it in that proportion. So I guess, yeah, that'll be my little few tips.
And I wouldn't worry so much about you doing a lot of talking there, because hopefully everyone's using their 2 ears, because there's been a lot of valuable information in there, a lot of great advice, and you're an inspiring person. You know, from what I've read about you and seen, it's inspirational to me, and I'm sure it'll be inspirational to a lot of young people out there. So Jordan, thank you very much for joining me and having this chat.
No, thank you, Mr. N. Keep up the inspiring work, and best wishes to all your pupils and listeners. Thank you.